with the Relationships, Love, and Happiness Project Facebook Live mini lecture. Today we are talking about infant attachment, a Q&A session. And so I received a few questions from you all about infant attachment, and my plan is to answer a few of them today. I also am going to summarize the talk that I'm about to give in a blog post for tomorrow, so you can look on relationshipslovehappiness.com for that blog post tomorrow, and I'll also post a link to it on the Facebook page tomorrow as well. All right, and there's no handout today, so here we go. So the first question is, my 1-year-old cries every time I leave the room. Does she have an insecure attachment style? So the answer to that, the basic answer is, based on what you've told me, no. We don't actually measure attachment on how a child behaves when the parent leaves them. Instead, attachment is usually measured when the parent returns from leaving the child. And so it's the reaction or the response that the child gives during the reuniting. And so lots of children cry when you leave them. And I have had many 1-year-olds, and I know that 1-year-olds tend to cry a lot when you leave. And so I feel your pain. When a child is crying every single time you leave the room, it can get stressful that you have to carry a child around with you all of the time. But just because a baby is crying when you leave the room, even if it's every single time, like you leave their sight, they're just having a little separation anxiety. It does not mean that they have an insecure attachment style. So when we are looking at 1-year-olds and we're trying to figure out what their attachment is, we tend to do this experiment called the strange situation. And in the strange situation, at its most basic form, the mother and the baby are, the mother and the baby are in a room and they're playing with some toys. The mother gets a cue to leave the room by the researchers, and the researchers are videoing the child. The mother leaves the room. Most infants will engage in will have some distress. Some will be visibly distressed, so they'll be crying, they'll crawl to the door, they'll yell out, "Mommy." Other babies will be distressed, their heart rate will increase, they might be sweaty, they might be feeling scared, but they're not exhibiting any outward behaviors. That is not, what happens when the mom leaves is not the determining factor of if they are secure or insecurely attached. Instead, after the baby gets a little distressed, the mother will be able to come back in the room. And when the mother comes back in, she is told to attempt to soothe the baby. Now, securely attached children are able to be soothed by their primary caregiver almost immediately. So next time you leave, whoever asked this question, next time you leave the room, when you come back and you pick your baby up, does your baby stop crying? Is your baby able to be soothed by you? Does your baby, when you pick your baby up and you hold them, do they go into your body, right? Or are they still pushing away, yelling and screaming and being angry at you? An insecurely attached child sometimes will, like I said, pull away. And they would do this every time you tried to soothe them, not allow you to soothe them. They might not allow you to pick them up. They might not go to you right when you come back in the room. They won't come to you. They might continue to be angry at you. They might become physically violent with you. There are a lot of behaviors that insecurely attached children exhibit during the reuniting of their parent. I plan to post a couple of videos that show how insecurely attached children do that reuniting. in the blog post tomorrow. So no, just because your 1-year-old cries every single time you leave the room, I know it can be stressful. I know it can be time consuming. It can be annoying even at times. It does not mean that your child is insecurely attached. Could your child have some insecurities? Yes. But it doesn't mean, that is not the determining factor. It does not mean that your child is insecurely attached. All right, question 2. Does putting my child in daycare damage his or her attachment style? And like a little bit of a follow-up to that is my child's attachment affected when the primary caregivers are behaving in different ways to my child? Okay, so the general answer is no. Putting your child in daycare does not mean that your child is going to have an insecure attachment style, and it doesn't mean that their attachment security is going to be automatically ruined. It's not the act of putting them in daycare. Instead, what could cause some insecurity in your baby is the inconsistent environment. So sometimes people, I know several people that attempt to like save money in childcare, and so they'll have 4 or 5 different people caring for their children. This is not to say that that's a bad thing, but sometimes an inconsistent environment, switching so many times from person to person to person, can cause the child to have a less secure attachment to their primary caregivers, just because they're switching people and switching environments. That also means if you're at a daycare center where the teachers are switching over and over and over again. We had our children, our twins were in a daycare center when they were 2, 3 years old, and the teachers were changing constantly. It was not good for the children's attachment. The switching environments can negatively impact attachment. So the inconsistent environment could, or if in your home with you and your partner, you are consistently sensitive and responsive and attentive to your baby, but then they go to daycare or they go with their nanny and their person is not as attentive, not consistently sensitive, that definitely could be a problem. I would say that it becomes a real problem if and when your child is left to cry it out by the other caregiver, or if they're crying too frequently for too long a period of time. And I know I'm speaking in pretty general terms here when I say too long or too frequently. Like, what does that exactly mean? Well, every child is different, and so the amount of stress that they can tolerate is different per baby. I would say that, crying for 10 minutes at a time every day, several times a day, is a big problem. And so what do you do if you need someone to care for your child? Well, when you go and you try to find a place, you ask them questions like, what do you do when a baby is crying and seems to be inconsolable? What's the protocol? The incorrect answer is, well, we attempt to distract them or calm them down, and if they can't calm down, we have 7 other children to watch, and so we have to let them cry it out sometimes. That's the wrong answer. That's when you hightail it out of there, and you don't leave your child in their care, in my opinion. The correct answer is we attempt to soothe and distract and calm the baby, and if they are completely inconsolable after 20 minutes, when we were physically attempting to calm the baby down, we call you. You should be told anytime your child is crying for more than 15 or 20 minutes. It doesn't mean that you're going to rush to the daycare center and take care of him or her immediately, but you need to know every single time your child is crying for that extended period of time, 20 minutes straight, or whatever you want the number to be, you should get a phone call or a text. Susie's been crying for 20 minutes. James has been crying for 15 minutes. It would be good for you to know. And if it's happening repeatedly and they cannot console your baby, then you need to either come up with another plan, come up with some tricks for them, like, oh, well, James really likes to do A, B, and C. Have you tried that? Or you need to find a caregiver who's capable of soothing your child. And this is a big problem with daycare centers because, or in-home places or nannies, because people tend to have other children that they're taking care of at the same time. And it's more than the typical family, right? So I have 4 children. I care for 4 children at once when I'm with them. But a lot of daycare centers, it's 6 children to every adult, or 7 children, depending on their age, to every adult. And that's tough on any adult. But I think that for the sake of your child's attachment, which, as you know from the other lectures and the other blog posts, it's very important that you find a way to make every person who your child interacts with, every person who cares for your baby, to be loving, responsive, and consistent. And so if that means you have to switch daycare centers or you have to get a new nanny, it might mean that you have to switch daycare centers or get a new nanny. Question 3. I think my son has an insecure attachment. Is he destined for a life of bad relationships? This is a good question, and a lot of students at James Madison actually asked me this question. So what if you realize that when your child is 4, 5, 7 years old that they have an insecure attachment style? Are they just doomed? Are they just going to have bad relationships forever? There's not one answer to this question. No. If you, their primary caregiver, are willing to change the way that you interact with this child so that you can try to help them build attachment security, then no. Because you have the ability to. We know through many, many research studies that through changing parent behavior, parent-child interaction, we can build attachment security. Even grown adults, they can go their whole lives having an insecure attachment style, and then they get in a relationship that feels good, that feels safe, and they can get earned security in that relationship. If you have a small child, a young child, or even a teenager, you have a child, and you realize that they are starting to exhibit, or not starting, but they've always exhibited some insecure tendencies, right? Some insecure behaviors. There are things that you can do as a parent to help build up that child's attachment security. But you're going to have to revamp the way that you interact with them. You're going to have to read a lot of books on childhood attachment. Depending on how old your child is, you can read books on elementary school attachment, middle school age children attachment, high schoolers with insecure attachment tendencies. There are tons of resources out there. And if you feel like you can't do it, like it's too much, it's too overwhelming, you have 2 choices. You can give up, and you can watch your child have some not so great relationships or have some difficulty building relationships. Or you can get some professional help. There are attachment theory therapists out there. Their specialty is attachment theory. Their specialty, they went to school to be an attachment certified therapist. Contact one. Bring your child in. Let them help you. And that's my best advice. If it feels like it's too overwhelming, if it feels like you can't do it alone, like you've gone too far, find an attachment certified therapist and let them help you. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments of this video, and I will take a look at them while I'm writing the blog post that's going to go up tomorrow. again, if you'd like to hear some of the, see some of the answers to these questions, and if you have any other ones, feel free to check out the blog tomorrow at relationshipslovehappiness.com. Have a great afternoon.